Item 53, number 1. Senator from James City County, Senator Norman.
Thank you very much. I would respectfully move that Senate Amendment 53 1S on page 13 pass, sir.
Senator.
Speaking to that motion, over the years that I've had the privilege of being here, I have found that judges can be one of the most problematic and troublesome areas that we will deal with in the legislative process. Some of you have had the opportunity to serve long enough to know that judges used to be selected based upon who had the political muscle. And if you weren't in budget conference, you didn't necessarily get a judge no matter what the workload factors were. A number of years ago, some of us on this body who served on the Public Safety Subcommittee decided we needed to go to a scoring system. And I will say, at least in the mind of this one senator, what brought that about in my mind was when we were in budget conference, we were almost prepared to wrap up the budget when one of the members of the House of Delegates had a hissy fit and refused to sign off on the budget conference until he had a judge created in his jurisdiction. It was totally and completely unjustified. I would say, Mr. President, hence we went to a qualification and quantification on the judgeships. I am very mindful that there are those who would like to create or continue to have a judge in the 20th Circuit with the retirement of Judge McCahill. And let me share a few things with you. It is currently the intention of the Senate to both authorize and fund 16 judgeships. Unfortunately, the judgeship with the retirement of Judge McCahill is number 22 in the list. So that is 6 below the cutoff, and we would be jumping over 5 other judgeships which have a stronger workload indicator. I would further say, based upon the demographical data that we have today, the caseload in that jurisdiction is shrinking, and even after that judge retires, the remaining 3 judges will only have a workload indicator of 1.1, and you have to be a 1 to be qualified to be funded. The interesting thing is, for those of you that might be in contiguous jurisdictions like Fauquier or Rappahannock, your judges will have a higher workload indicator, but those positions would not be filled. So, Mr. President, with all due respect, I would request that we do not pass item number 53 1S, as it is going to create chaos. And think about this. If we want to start down that road, I can assure you that some in this body are going to get a lot more judges than others of you. So I know the intentions are good. I appreciate that we all have to advocate for our jurisdictions. This would be a bad policy.
Be agreed to. He did. Thank you, Senator.
Mr. President, I'm not blowing on all cylinders today, and usually I only have 3 on a good day. I do want us to pass item number 53 1S as it's put in the budget.
Thank you, Senator. The question is, shall number 53, number 1 be agreed to? The senator from Fairfax.
Gentleman yield for a question.
Would the senator from James City County yield for a question?
I'd be happy to.
He yields, Senator.
I would preface by saying I appreciate the gentleman's comments, but it's my recollection that 3, perhaps 4 years ago, we actually passed a law authorizing judges. And we have a certain number by state code that are authorized by each judicial district. So was that legislation meaningless, or what is the purpose of that legislation if it's now subject to the Finance Committee's decision as to what actually gets funded?
The senator from James City County.
Mr. President, I would respond, but there are 2 considerations. There are judgeships that we authorize, and then there are judgeships that we fund, and they do not necessarily match up. And what we do is we look at the workload indicators that we have and determine whether or not it is appropriate or inappropriate to fund a judge. In November of this year, we will have the updated workload indicators from the National Center of State Courts. And at that time, all of us will be able to take a comprehensive review of what those latest numbers are to determine whether or not new judgeships should be authorized and whether new or existing judgeships should be funded. And we can do that because we have a biennium budget coming up.
Thank you. The senator from Fairfax City.
I would simply ask the gentleman, which does he think is more compelling evidence? A survey from the National Council of State Courts located in Williamsburg, I might add, or having to sit through 3 hours in a motions day in Fairfax County before I can get in front of a judge?
The senator from James City County.
Mr. President, I realize that it's very personal and professional to you when you were sitting there waiting, but as I look around this room, I doubt if there is a single attorney who has not had to sit through a court proceeding waiting for them to call your particular case. So I realize it may chagrin you, but it is nothing unique to you, sir.
I thank the gentleman.
Thank you, Senator. The junior senator from Loudoun, Senator Wexton.
Mr. President, parliamentary inquiry.
Yes, Senator.
When there is a floor amendment
Yes.
pending, but there is also a floor amendment in the amendment folder, what is the proper
Yes,
procedure?
Senator, they're
at this
not in
point?
conflict, so we will make a motion to pass his, and then I will call on you after that.
Thank you, Mr. President. Speaking to the motion,
Yes, Senator.
the senator from James City County is correct. I have a floor amendment on today to restore funding to the 20th Circuit, which is Loudoun, Fauquier, and Rappahannock for our circuit court judge. That is for a vacancy that was left when our most senior judge, Burke McCahill, retired on January 1st. This would bring us back to 5 judges in the circuit instead of 4. Judge McCahill had just been reappointed 2 years ago, so he would still have another 6 years on his term. I don't know what this body would have done had he not done us the courtesy of retiring. When he retired on January 1st, he did that with the intention, I believe, that this body would be able to appoint a successor for him. Instead, we have now are taking the money away, taking away his judgeship altogether. We will unwittingly, I think, or knowingly, create a situation where judges don't want to retire on January 1st or don't want to give the General Assembly an opportunity to appoint successors. Because they can just retire in the off season, and the governor can appoint a different judge to take their place. Now, we seem to really rely on this weighted caseload study as if it's flawless, and I submit, unfortunately, that it's not. It does not take into account a lot of factors. It doesn't take into account at all use of interpreters in cases. And I know in my jurisdiction and in a lot of Northern Virginia, routinely we use interpreters, and they can double the time it takes for cases to be heard. I disagree very strongly with the senator from James City County's assessment of our caseload in Loudoun County. Our population was 170,000 in 2010. 310,000 in 2000 it was 170,000, 310 in 2010, and it's about 380,000 people now. And our cases have kept pace with it. We were fortunate to have a little dip back in the Great Recession because people couldn't afford to get divorced. Well, guess what? Now they can, and their cases are taking quite a bit of time. Loudoun was a 4.7 in the weighted caseload study, but again, I would submit that that was a flawed study. So we have speedy trial issues in our criminal cases, and civil cases are always double, and were before we got the fifth judge, sometimes triple booked. And if you didn't get heard, you went right to the back of the line. Another issue is that we have suffered a great deal of opioid and heroin deaths in my jurisdiction, as I'm sure many of you have. And it was really the hope of the judges in Loudoun County to be able to stand up a drug court this year. We're not going to be able to do that if we don't have that fifth judge. So I would submit to the gentleman from James City County that I did like last year's budget because you funded our judge. And taking it away in this particular fashion makes no sense at all, and I would ask that the amendment fail.
Thank you, Senator. The senator from Eastern Fairfax County, Senator Surville.
Speaking to the amendment, Mr.
The senator has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, I read the weighted caseload study when it came out, and I appreciate the effort and the intent in trying to avoid a lot of games being played. But the reality is the study has a lot of problems. First of all, about half the localities in Virginia, the local governments, pay for a law clerk for each circuit court judge. Each law clerk costs $50,000, $60,000 per judge, something like that, maybe $45,000 in some jurisdictions. Having a law clerk there to support a judge means that judge spends a lot more time on the bench, a lot more time hearing cases, and instead of pushing paper, which in half the state, that doesn't happen. And I believe in the next study, their law clerks might be getting counted. I'm not really sure. But in half the state, our localities are investing a lot of money to make the system go faster, which doesn't get taken into account in terms of how those caseload studies determine. I would also submit that the way cases are litigated in some parts of the state are different than other parts of the state, just simply because the cases are bigger, they're more complex, there's more money at issue, people can afford to pay more. And I don't say that to say the lawyers are better or something like that. It's just people spend more money, and it takes a lot longer. And I've tried cases in all parts of the state, and it's different. And that's partly why we're here, is to be able to make those judgments and not defer to some, group that, is in theory objective and trying to figure it out. It doesn't even practice law in this state. And I would submit that there are some jurisdictions that I think game the study. There's some jurisdictions that open new cases, where in other jurisdictions we don't open a new case. They keep it under the same filing number. There's lots of things that go on that mess the study up. And so I don't think the data we get back is as good as it could be in terms of making these decisions. And that's why we got elected, to make these decisions, not to defer it to some other third party to make them for us. So in terms of two more things I just want to say really quick, just to elucidate this further. I think a lot of times at least when lawyers get up, people make lawyer jokes and they say that, that we're doing this for ourselves, or, we want to make more money or something like that. Let me just tell you, I had in Prince William County, by the way, the study said Prince William County should get another circuit court judge. I think it was 2 years ago. And Prince William County was authorized a new circuit court judge 2 years ago under this study. For some reason this year, Prince William County's judge got taken away using the same data. I'm not really clear why that happened, but in any event, that happened. Before Prince William was authorized as 6th Circuit Court judge, I think 2 years ago, I had cases in Prince William County where I would go to court, I would get there at 10 a.m., they would tell me, get in line. And I would wait around until 1 o'clock. They'd say, we can't hear you today, come back tomorrow. This is after spending hours of time prepping my client, getting witnesses to court, getting ready. Then I have to come back the next day, get in line. I wait around, noon would roll around, they'd say, we can't hear you today, come back next week. You know what? I'm making plenty of money sitting on my butt, sitting around a courthouse, not waiting to be heard, and my client has to pay my bill anyway, right? Not funding these things probably makes lawyers more money, because all we do is sit around in court and get paid by the hour to sit there. The reason we want these things to get funded is so our clients aren't having to waste a lot of money and time, and they're having their life and all their stuff put on hold because the system isn't capable of processing their problem. And so, I think a lot of us want to see the system work. We want to see it work well and work efficiently, and that's why we want to do it. And having that kind of real-life intelligence by having people that practice in these courts make these decisions, I think, is better than having this system that does it. And the last thing I'll say is, in terms of the wisdom of this study, Fairfax County was authorized a 15th Circuit Court judge in, I think, 1993. And the study recommended that be taken away, that it wasn't merited. I want to point out, in 1993, according to Google, Fairfax County had 866,000 people. Today, it's grown by more than 300,000 people. So Fairfax County today has grown by almost the same size of the second largest jurisdiction in the entire Commonwealth of Virginia, Prince William County, almost as much. And the study says it still should go backwards. And I don't think that's because Fairfax County was great at getting judges back under the old system. I don't think that has anything to do with it. But I would submit that this study isn't coming out with the correct results. And I think the unhappiness you're hearing is from people that have to practice in this world who know that it isn't working, and that's why we need to fund these positions. And, and in the absence of the Prince William spot being funded and the extra Fairfax spot not being funded, I can't support this amendment. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. The senior senator from Loudoun, Senator Black.
Speaking, I'm not sure which I'm speaking for. Do we have the amendment before us?
Senator,
or
you're
what are we
speaking to the
speaking
committee amendment.
Okay. Well, let me just say that I am very concerned about the way that we're doing the judges and the validity of some of the data. And I'm aware that in the areas that I represent, they're very high growth, very fast moving, and as a consequence, you have really massive land use issues. And as you have we've got data centers. Anybody who's been around up there see these gargantuan data centers, and there's going to be litigation, construction litigation that comes out of that. That's going to be extensive. This is not just running in and knocking out some quick case and moving on. This is something that takes a lot of time, and so I think the case mix differs in some of these areas. And anyway, we had I know in Loudoun County, for example, we had a very senior judge that we lost, and we had 3 junior judges who they had 2 years or less on the bench. Good, all good people, and anyway, it's put us in a pinch. And I know in Prince William we also have a similar situation. So I do hope that at some point along the process that some of the thoughts that you're hearing today are taken into account, and perhaps, if possible, there can be some adjustments made. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. The senator from Northern Fairfax County, Senator Howe.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to associate myself with the comments from the senator from James City County. Having been part of this body when everything was done by politics, and it really mattered how senior you were or which committee you chaired or which party you were with, I think what we're trying to do is to get the politics out and good public policy in, and have some kind of a standard we can use when we determine which judges to have. I was somewhat disappointed also with the last study. I think it did not have all of the considerations that should have happened. It was updated. And now we're starting with a new study that is going to be completed, I believe, in the end of October. My suggestion to those who are not happy with the old study, who don't have faith in our effort to do this, is that they engage themselves and the members of their judiciary in suggesting how to make the study better. Because the alternative is going to be to go back to a really politically rotten system. And I believe that this organization is sincere. This is what they do. It's small. It's a nonprofit. It's highly regarded around the country. And there are things they may be willing to change. One, for example, I've noticed is that they take what I think is too much attention to the distances traveled by judges and too little credit for those circuits that have got good docket control. If you have bad docket control, you do better than if you have good docket control. Perhaps looking at that would be helpful. But I think the approach to take is how do we make this a better study, not to slam it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. The senator from James City County, Senator Norman.
Thank you, Mr. President. If no one else cares to speak, sir.
You had the floor, Senator.
I listened very attentively to the arguments that were advanced by those senators from the particular jurisdictions that are affected. And there are lots of retorts that I could make about the inaccuracy of your comments, but let me just say this. There has been no abdication of the authorization or the funding of judges to a third party. We hired the National Center of State Courts to do an independent analysis for us, and after reviewing that analysis, the Senate Finance Committee, and especially the subcommittee dealing with the subject matter, made a determination that it was the only empirical data that was available to us to make an informed decision. I appreciate your anecdotal comments, but I say to you, your situation is not unique. I probably get around the Commonwealth of Virginia as much as any attorney in this body because of the nature of what I do for 100 lawyers. And there is a wide difference of approaches. And as the senator from Northern Fairfax suggested, some of it is a docket control system. Some are very sophisticated. Others are not sophisticated. But I appreciate very much what you are saying. But you are asking us to pass over 5 other judgeships that have a better score than this particular judge and say to them, tough, you don't get funded. We're going to say to Rappahannock and Fauquier that your caseload indicators are higher, but we're going to drop down and do that in Loudoun. I suggest to you that this is not the end of the discussion. In November, we will have the updated demographical information from the National Center of State Courts. You can scrutinize it as hard as you want. You can try to find additional empirical data that may refute or, surprisingly enough, may support what is in there. But I would respectfully ask that the Senate amendment be agreed to, which does not include the funding of this judgeship, sir.
Thank you, Senator. The question is, shall the committee amendment be agreed to? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to.